Now?
Yes, and we're recording, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. So first, thank you for having me today. And I want to apologize for my English and maybe my French accents. I'm not used to do presentation in English. I usually do it in French. I'm currently a student. I'm finishing my PhD in Montpellier 3, a university in south of France. And before I start the presentation, I wanted to quote George Lakoff here. It's a quote that I like very much. It says, if we had wheels or moved along on the ground on our bellies like snakes, math might be very different. On the one hand, I find it very funny. And on the other hand, it sums up the idea of my research topic about the link between taking into account the body and the way of thinking and therefore of learning. So I am currently in the last year of my doctorate at Paul Valéry Montpellier 3 University, and I'm working on using gestures in verbal systems acquisition toward an embodied and multimodal language learning. I study the case of bilingual students in French as a foreign language class. In other words, I use the gesture in the foreign language class to remedy the difficulties that the learners encounter in the acquisition of French conjugation. So here is the general outline of my presentation. I will not have time to dwell on the theoretical notion that punctuate all of my research, so I chose only one, the cognitive function of the gesture, and will focus on the empirical aspect of the research. So we'll start with the hypothesis and problematic, then the theoretical contribution, which is the cognitive function of the gesture. Then I will introduce the devices and challenges of the empirical approach by presenting the state of the art, the corpus composition, and then finally, I will show you the research results. So about the hypothesis and problematic of my research, first, I want to say that my research is multi and interdisciplinary because it's it's at the crossroads between language didactics, cognitive science, neurolinguistics, psycholinguistic, and gesture studies. I chose to work on this subject because as a French as a foreign language teacher for more than 10 years, some of my observation particularly struck me. Has first, the lack of interest of learners towards learning conjugation due to its lack of playfulness, of non-renewal, and the methods used. Because, for example, we can see that in France, the way of approaching conjugation has not changed since the end of the 19th century. Then I also noticed that a large number of learners, if not the majority, encounter difficulties in the pronunciation of French verb endings. So I'm sure you all don't know French, but if, for example, I say je mange, I eat, learners would have the tendency to pronounce je mangeais. So they will pronounce everything they read in French. Which according to Surcouf, is due to the interference with the French orthographic system, which contains many silent letters. So there's a problem between the French orthographic system, which could be an entire language on its own, and the speaking French language. And there's confusion between the two of them when you learn them at the same time. We can see also an interference with the mother tongue of the learners due to the pronunciation. I also noticed a constant immobility, especially through the completely unnatural sitting position for children in class. So that was an issue when I started the thesis. It was 4 years ago, but now with the COVID situation, it's really, really problematic. And then we've noticed a decontextualization of learning, generate passing by, not taking into account the body and the verb that are taken from their context to be presented in a purely theoretical way. So I'm talking about the French way to teach conjugation. I hope it's not the case in every culture. Here is my hypothesis. The use of gesture associated with oralization of verbal items would facilitate their acquisition, in particular by accompanying and helping the various cognitive processes. And my problematic, we will try to answer this question. Can the integration of the gesture into the French verbal system learning promote its acquisition and long-term memorization? Can it help the understanding of grammar concepts? Can gesture be used as a transitional tool between the learner's first language, which is Arabic and English, and the foreign language, the target language, which is French? So this is the theoretical, the function of the gestures with the one that interests us. The gestures has many functions, but we choose to focus only on 3 of them. So this schema is in French because I took it from my research, but the words are pretty transparent. I think you can guess the meaning, but I will explain anyway, okay? We have the communicative function, which is divided in 2. You have the communicative gesture that you use to communicate, and you have the extra communicative gesture that are when you gesturing without purpose, okay? If you are scratching your nose or yawning, or you will express something about yourself, but it will not be direct communication. Then we have the cultural function of the gesture, which is related to the communicative function, because according to your culture, you will use gesture to communicate different gestures and to behave. And then the one that is really important for my research is the cognitive function. I divide 3 functions in this one, the memorization, comprehension, and reflection. So gesturing will help you in those these cognitive processes. Okay, I will pass here quickly because it's not it's interesting, but it's not really relevant for us. But in the research, I use the typology of McNeil, what you can see on the right. This is how we, the type of category of the gesture that we use to analyze. We have the iconic, for example, iconic that you use to represent a concrete concept of or objects. you have the didactic, the pointing gesture that is the most used in class usually. So I will not explain all of this, but you have it here if you want to take a look. Then we're going to pass through communicative function and cultural function of the gesture and see directly the cognitive function of the gesture. So cognitive function helps you to for the comprehension. It has various cognitive processes such as comprehension. Numerous researches have been carried out concerning the pedagogical gesture, like Tilia, where the teacher performs gesture to support their remarks. I quote, a nonverbal gesture which helps the student to grasp meaning as an image would. Some researchers, such as Golden Meadow and Ali Bali, have been able, through experiments, to prove the role of the gesture in understanding a foreign language or in explaining lessons. Then seeing someone gesticulate while speaking has also been shown to improve memorization of linguistic elements and concepts used. My research is different in the sense that I question the cognitive value of the gesture when the learners themselves gesticulate. I want to quote here Marcel Jousse, who is an anthropologist of language, and he says that we can only memorize what we have done. There is a memory of gestures, there is no memory of ideas. So it's really important to use your motor skills as well. We have two concepts for that. When we use the 3 communication channels while learning, the visual, the sound, and the motor, it's called the enactment effect. Or we have another way to call that is the concept of triple coding. Okay, when you use all your sense to learn. And finally, the use of the gesture helps in problem solving. For example, mental math with the abacus. This is the picture on the bottom right that you can see, but I will show you a short video about that. Abacus is Asian way for calculating. Okay, it's called soroban in Japan. And they first used the abacus to calculate. And when they master this, they remove the objects and keep the gesture with the hands. And then the movements of the hand are directly connected with the visual memory and helps calculating. So here we can see the link between the gesture and the way to think. Okay, I want to show you maybe an example.
23 plus 93 into 45 into 24 divided by 2. 50243. Okay. 123 plus 456 into 789 divided by 9. 40099. 147 plus 569 into 64 divided by 8. 23.
Okay, so you can see that gesturing can be very effective for calculation. Okay, and we think that other than in the mathematic fields, we can use this even to learn a language, to teach and learn a language. So about the devices and challenges of the empirical approach, I would like to start with the state of art with the foreign language method that are usually existing as a vehicle for learning. There are not much right now, but we choose to talk about grammar in motion. Grammar in motion is this picture in black. It's a French professor, Jean-Rémy Lapère, who use modern dance to teach English grammar notions. Okay, so I just explained and I will show you some video about that. Then we have the gesture way. This is this picture up, where Bill Bro using gesture more like a sign language to teach also English as a foreign language. And then we have AIM, which is the only method to teach and learn French as a foreign language. It's a Canadian method created by Wendy Maxwell. You can see her at the bottom right. And she's also using gesture to teach and learn French as a foreign language. So I'm going to show you grammar in motion, the way to teach and learn English grammar through dance.
Can.
So this is for the learners to perform. They have to perform some movements to help them to integrate the grammar. Okay.
Can't.
Then we have the gesture way. Maybe I'm going to skip a little to show you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael. Look, listen, gesture, and repeat. Look, this is a sitting room. This is a sitting.
So you see, he's using a kind of sign language that he created on his own to teach English. And then
Manger, manger, regarder, regarder, écouter, écouter, jouer, jouer, aimer, aimer, adorer, adorer.
In French class, the reason we do all the gestures is because we think it's easier to learn with actions to fit them into. So if Madame asks a question, she does all the gestures, then it's easier for us to know what she's saying, and it's easier for us to know what to say back.
So this is an extract of a class, AEM class, to teach French with gesture. So then about the corpus composition of my research, I was working as a French teacher in the French Institute of Kuwait before the COVID situation. So I did my research there. I had classes of bilingual Arabic and English speaking children between 7 and 11. They were learning French as a foreign language twice a week. And I took one test class that I took for 7 weeks, introducing my method with the gesture. So gesture that I took a little bit from AIM, maybe gesture that we created ourselves also. And I took also 2 control classes to make comparison of the results. Okay, I just want to show you an extract of what I was doing in my class with them. It's focusing only on the conjugation and on the verbal systems. Okay, so we were doing that for maybe 30 or 40 minutes at the end of each class to learn the French verbal system. In order to analyze the data, I used the multimodal annotation software called ELAN, which allow me to transcribe the speech and the gesture at the same time. So you have here a screenshot of ELAN. So it is hours and hours of work because you have to transcribe every line and every gesture. Okay, then according to the research results, they are generally positive. Our hypotheses were confirmed, and we have noticed a reduction in learner-teacher linguistic and gestural asymmetry. We can see that children produce on average 4 times more words in test class. So you see the first graphic is the control class, where the, it's still in French, I'm sorry here, but I will explain. The enseignant teacher is producing 800 words in 10 minutes of class, which is a lot. And then you see the kids really few, okay, compare. In my test class with the gesture, so I, the teacher, used to pronounce 400 words, so twice less, divided by 2 than the control class. And you can see that the students are speaking much more. Okay, so this is for the speaking part. And then, of course, they produce many more gestures in test class. Then the gestures produced in class are more varied than in the control class. We can see that in the control class, there are only 4 types of gesture, and mainly the didactic. Didactic is the pointing gesture. So it's the gesture that we use a lot in the beginner class because we don't have the words to ask or to say anything. So we just, so that makes sense, okay? But in the test class, even if they don't know really how to speak, you can see a variety of gesture. You have the didactic, of course, it still be here, but you have iconics that refers to concrete things. You have the metaphorical, which is abstract ideas, which is interesting because in beginner class, they still can use metaphorical ideas and gesture because it's linked. If they gesture, they will speak at the same time. And you have emblematic gesture, which are the cultural gesture, okay, like this or like many emblematic gestures. And then the beat gesture is interesting, called battement, beat. Beat gesture is the one you use when you speak to make the rhythm in your speech. So it means that they speak and they need to make the rhythm in the speech, okay? It's totally not possible in the control class because they just sit and listen. And then what we have noticed as well is, of course, clear improvement in pronunciation, especially the final verbal endings, the E silent, the silent letters that we had an issue with at the beginning, because we linked the sound also with the gesture. So they know that if I say je mange, I will not say je mangeais because je mange is a silent E. So then I don't have to correct them all the time. They will auto-correct and say, oh, right, this gesture is silent, okay? Or this gesture is on, it's not ons. So we saw clear improvement in pronunciation, also improved comprehension on the verbal system, about the pronouns, the pronominal verbs, the near future that we did also in this class. Because before the test, they didn't understand anything. They were just repeating je, tu, il, elle, the pronouns. They didn't even know the signification, the meaning, okay? But now that they link these things with gesture, like il, he is a man, we say moustache, he, and elle, long hair. It's a bit of cliche and stereotype, I'm sorry for that, but it works with kids. And elle, long hair, they know that elle is a girl, il is a boy, and je, it's me. So it's not something that they learn that because they have to memorize it. They really, truly understand it. Then we check the memorization. After 3 months, so long-term memorization, it's the picture that you can see on the bottom. And we noticed that they remembered everything while gesturing. So they were just gesturing and remember how to conjugate, remember all the vocabulary we did. They really forgot nothing. And finally, the influence of the thinking process, because it's external, so it's visible. You can see the kids when they are thinking, because they say, okay, is it je, or so you can see what they are thinking about. And usually the thinking process is shorter. They can answer to a question faster because they think as they gesture. So they have the process faster. The cognitive process is faster. As a conclusion, so these results clearly show us that the gesture has an impact on the learning of a foreign language. It would be interesting to pursue and deepen this idea, perhaps in other aspects of the target language, because I focused only on the conjugation, but I believe there are many things to do with the gesture. And even with adult learners, adult subjects, I think we could do nice things. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Tilia. We'll take a few short questions at this time.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Tomas.
Okay. Tilia, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it, and especially as a former teacher at the primary school where I used to use a lot of gestures, and I understand that gestures should be understandable, recognizable by students, that should be suitable, appropriate, and that what I always found very useful is that they help to establish the vocabulary and meaning connections, sort of help them associate these two. And it was also very helpful sort of to create the scaffold, right? The help the scaffolding process. What I was sometimes quite irritated about was that they over gestured. Like, so for example, in Japan, when you're teaching, you showed in the video as well, you say my name is, right? And then you meet the child somewhere in the supermarket, and you ask, hey, what's your name? And the child goes, my name is, right? And so I was going to ask you, like, where do you think is the right balance, like not between, like, not overdoing and sort of between keeping it natural?
Oh, you think, is there a time when it becomes natural? Because of course it will be unnatural. This is how they remember it and they play with it. Because if it was natural, I think it would not be playful for them. So So I think the answer is in the cognitive process, because the gesture, they are going to forget them anyway, okay? But the connection which has been made between the body and the brain will always stay, I think. Okay, so it's okay if they are young and they keep gesturing, over gesturing, and that's okay, because we want them to create connection in the brain between the body and the speech and the language. In my research, I have a longer part about neuro-linguistic, but I didn't have time to present it today. But it's really interesting to see the connection in the brain between those two dimensions, the body and the mind, that we have been separated in class for no reason, okay? But maybe 5-10 years after they forget the gesture, I think the connection will still be here, I hope.
Right. And also the gesture needs to stay the same, right? I mean, if you keep changing the gestures, or if, for example, students get a different teacher who uses a different gesture, that might lead to confusion. But
yeah, that's a problem. I did it with only one class. That's why a method like AIM, which is a truly existing method, and you have to follow always the gesture, like if it's a language, it's maybe good to follow a method so all the students can be on the same page. Yeah, because maybe after it could be confusing. Right. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this very intriguing presentation. I could especially appreciate it because I have started learning French in a very late years in my life. I've struggled with all what you have talked about, conjugation, silent, and all this. Now, I'm curious about how you would apply those gestures, methods into intermediate and more advanced level students. I wanted to see some examples.
Exactly. I did not. For my research, it's only for only for kids, because first I started with adults. I wanted to work with adults. The thing is, adults are a way to learn. They are not prepared for something new, or maybe they will think it's childish. So it didn't work. So I went back to kids. And here I did much way A1 level, so it was more like beginner level. But I tried with another class with intermediates, learning the pronouns and the indirect pronouns. So if you're familiar with French, like il lui parle, il le regarde, how to make the difference between indirect and direct. And more than to teach them a sign language, we use language to has a memo technique thing, like il lui donne, to make a gesture to remind them that it's indirect, and je le regarde, direct, something like this. So it's something that we can do, I think, at every level. To make understand maybe more nuanced understanding of the grammar.
Right.
I think we can do something with the almost everything with the gesture, because we learn how to speak with our bodies and our gestures, so it's only natural. I think we can do everybody.
Yeah, I could easily imagine teaching like word order. For example, for Japanese students, French or English has totally different word order. So in my old days, like with silent way, they would use fingers to indicate, like in the morning or something like that. Yeah, to indicate what, just with the fingers, but you can use body parts to
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
do that.
But the thing is not only to use the what we call the pedagogical gesture. Pedagogical is the only the teacher who is moving. No, the most important is they need to move and they need to experience the grammar within their body.
Mm-hmm. And one last quick question. Do you feel that in France, are teachers more trained to use gestures in their language classes? No?
Absolutely not.
Oh,
Not.
really? Okay, that
There's
was my impression.
no, there's nothing new in France. As I said in my presentation, end of the 19th century. So you see, we still learn things like this. No, nothing new. That's why it's important for me to have this research to make things maybe change a little bit because it's really still traditional.
I see.
Hmm.
Okay. Because I've encountered quite a few teachers who use gestures to teach French,
Yeah.
including pronunciations. So I thought it was a big trend in France, but
Not
okay.
yet.
Okay. Donc, bon courage.
Merci.
Je regrette, mais il faudra finir maintenant. If you would like to continue this discussion, there is, I believe, discussion room 2 is open. And thank you so much, Tilia.
Merci. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Gentlemen, can we have a big round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll be hearing from Tomas, who will be talking about pedagogical challenges of mixed age primary classroom FL teaching, implications for teacher education. And that will begin in 4 minutes. Tomas, when you're ready, you can share your screen.